Welcome everyone to this morning's investor panel. Today we will try and cover a lot of ground in the 40 minutes that we have, also leaving a little bit of time for questions so that you can use the opportunity to ask pressing issues to these very experienced investors. So today we'll try and cover three themes, basically. We will start by looking into what does the field look like right now. We all know that it's not great times for investments, but what are they seeing is going to happen over the next 12 to 18 months. Then we'll take a look at what are the breakthrough things that they're looking for when they're going into investments right now. What are they hoping to see in the field that will really push it forward to the next level. And then finally, a little bit about how should you prepare and present to investors to kind of catch their attention. Marian already introduced me, so we'll skip me for now, and then I'll just let this very, very experienced panel, who we're very fortunate to have today. They really comprise a lot of experience from across the globe, both corporate and private investments, both within therapeutics and technologies within cell and gene therapy, so it's great to have them here. Maybe, Christian, if you'll start by introducing yourself, and then we'll just leave it down the road.
Sure, happy to. Hello, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Today, my name is Christian Uhrich. I'm investment director at Ventures, the corporate venture arm of Merck KGaA. We invest across the biotech and the tech field, and in the biotech space, specifically in therapeutics, as well as in tools and technologies, covering some of the topics we just heard of earlier. Pleasure.
Yeah, hi, Therese Liechtenstein. Good to be here. I'm an investment director for Biocapital. We focus on investing in advanced modalities, so that includes cell and gene therapies, but many more modalities.
Hello everyone, Matthieu Coutet. I'm a partner with Sofinnova Partners. We are a VC platform investing from company creations to our growth investments, so I'm very happy to be here. Hi everyone, I'm Artemy Shumskiy. I'm a senior associate at LongeVC. As you can probably guess by the name, we focus on longevity. We try to be pragmatic about it, and besides just like hallmarks of aging, we try to focus on next generation enabling biotechnology for enabling treatments, tools, and diagnostics of tomorrow. We mostly focus on early stage, C to Series A, and a global.
Good morning. My name is Uhrich. I'm a principal at Avant Bio. We're a New York-based fund investing in the US and Europe. We only do life science industrials, so essentially anything that goes inside a CRO and CDMO we're very interested in. The more boring, the better for us. We don't do any therapeutics. We are a Series A, Series B fund. Happy to be here.
Great. Thanks a lot for the introductions. So we all know that there are mixed signals in the field right now, right? Some big companies are withdrawing. Novo Nordisk, one of them, within the pharma space at least, not the foundation. Coutet doing the same, pulling the plug on this. Other great signals actually also coming out. Very recently, Aspen Neuro got a big Series C based on limited phase 1 data. ARPA also just got the same within gene therapy. So there are things that are moving ahead. People are getting investments, but also companies that are withdrawing from the space, big players. And that's not unusual, of course, when we're talking about new modalities, but it just becomes a little bit difficult to predict what's going to happen and how that's going to evolve over the coming time when you're in the field. So Matthieu, you and Sofinnova have a big portfolio. You've been investing in the field in a long time. What are you discussing? What are you seeing that's going to happen over the next, or what do you predict is going to happen in the coming time?
Yeah, so thanks for the questions. Easy to answer that one. So definitely, I think cell and gene therapy is not in the hype anymore these days for investors. It has been very high in 2021. Also difficult to answer that questions after, let's say, what we heard from Legend, and it was a very great speech. And honestly, after listening about Legends, why we are not going into autologous anymore? I think that's a good question, and I prepare my answer saying that we should maybe focus in vivo therapy, but maybe we should discuss a bit more about it. But anyway, I think there is a clear trend from ex vivo to in vivo, at least at the early stage of the biotech sector. When we look at the last BD deals and acquisitions like Capstan with AVI, for example, or some others, Kite with Interius and so on. So either with LNP, targeted LNPs or targeted LVs in order to reduce the cost, to have, let's say, a better scalability of the product. But this is one part, so from ex vivo to in vivo. Also, I think the other pillar in which we are investing is more targeted capsid, not only for cell therapy, but also for gene therapy like new AAV capsid able to, let's say, encapsulate a larger gene. We have invested in Avant, for example, with a dual capsid to encode a large gene. And also the use of AI. We discussed this in the previous talk. We believe that AI could also help in finding this new capsid. And the third pillar is around CMC, and we have also discussed this with Fred, how we could improve CMCs, how we could make it simpler and with a better cost of goods. At the end, we have examples of biotech that has been launched, like Astraveus, as an example, using microfluidic technologies, so new technologies able to go from with a closed system from the bench to the bed. And I think for these three pillars, in vivo technologies, new capsid, also using AI, and new technologies around CMCs will be, I think, the trends in over the next 18 months.
Okay. Thank you, Matthieu. So Therese, when we were preparing for this panel, we talked a little bit about the Gartner hype cycle, right? And maybe you all know this, right? An evolving field goes through these ebbs and flows where you go through the hype and then you go in this valley of death. And maybe the field that we are talking about here, the cell and gene therapy, is in the more depression part of the cycle. What opportunities does that actually give you as an investor when you look at that, when you've been through the hype and now you're in that depression phase? Are there things that change where you think about investing in a different way, or are there opportunities that you can leverage?
Yeah, I mean, to us, yeah, indeed, this is not in the hype phase, but to us, we don't mind investing anti-cyclically, and in fact see several positives. So of course you learn from the mistakes, failures, challenges of the front runners. The business case is maturing, so the infrastructure is maturing, so specialized CDMOs, CROs, but also hospitals, physicians experience with pricing, for example, with gene therapies, like a 2 million price tag for a one-time gene therapy. We now understand much better what type of target product profile you need. You need durability. You need to be able to come off the standard of care for it to be successful in the market. And of course, for investors, valuations are more attractive, which you need to remember. We also have investors that we need to make a return for, so we don't like to overpay. I think in a cell and gene therapy space, there's many positives at the moment. We now have 4 blockbuster drugs, including Carvykti. We have this maturing space. We heard about manufacturing improvements, COGS improvements, physicians and clinics being more used to the modalities. So in essence, yeah, we don't look at these cases differently, but we like to also invest in that space. And I think I agree with you in terms of the trends. We're also looking at many of those. But where we're thinking a bit differently is we are looking at autologous CAR-T. We have also current in our portfolio our CAR-T cell therapy in phase 2 for T-cell malignancies that is showing very good data. And we're actually also currently looking at autologous CAR-T for solid tumor indications, and curious to see how Legend's products will develop. So yeah, we continue to be positive in the space.
It's good to hear with the positive sentiment. So, Ola, I'm going to ask you a question because you're representing the U.S. here, kind of. What do you see in the U.S. kind of from a what signals indicate a shift in investment sentiment, or is there a shift, or what's the temperature over there?
I think it's quite similar. I think a lot of people say it's always better in the US, but I think a little bit to echo what's being said here, I think there's been, probably some people disagree, but there's been some overinvestment. Just throw a lot of money at the problem and see if you can fix it. And then I think the industry went into a bit like wait and see, let's see if this actually works, no more investments, which I think a lot of companies have suffered from. But what I think is positive is, and maybe taking a step back, so some of our LPs may or may not be big biopharma who have active programs here. And I think the interesting thing is, and a little bit to echo Legend's presentation as well, there's more of a stop, wait and see, okay, how can we actually do this differently? There's now, what I would say in 2025, a renewed interest in trying new things, kind of backwards engineering, hey, we can't use the old processes, we need to get the cost down from day one. So I think if you're a startup now with a promising product and some early data, I think it's actually a quite good time to get going with partnerships here. From a funding standpoint, yeah, it's super tough. I mean, people have over-invested here and now licking their wounds. It will probably get a little bit worse before it gets better, but I'm always a bit negative. But I think you're seeing kind of the early green shoots of, oh, hey, let's try something different because what we're doing now is not working that well, or it can be improved. So that's at least what I see.
Okay, thanks, Ole. So we'll shift gears. We only have 30 minutes, so we need to shift gears a little bit and talk about these game-changing opportunities. You talked a little bit about it, Matthieu, but let's dig a little bit deeper into that kind of topic. And Artemy, you know, what's your take on what could change here? What are you looking for within some of these areas about enabling technologies, operational strategies, maybe even business models that you think are interesting and could change the field?
Well, speaking of enabling technologies, I think there are two paths that you can take essentially. One is like the more idealist and the more is more pragmatic. And the idealist one is like creating something entirely new. Imagine investing in Genentech when they were spinning out recombinant DNA technology. This is one, but it's obviously rare, burdened with risks. The more pragmatic one is focusing on problems that have not been solved in some form or capacity. So I think a very good example is in vivo CAR-T, where it kind of solves a lot of the problems that autologous and allogeneic products have. And what we saw this year is, well, the kind of the validation of this thesis. And so I think it's really looking to solve those fundamental problems. So in our case, and kind of coming back to what Matthieu was saying about the trends, we are quite keen on the gene therapy for common disease trends, so kind of going out of rare disease into the more common diseases like cancer, cardiometabolic, and et cetera. I think there are also a lot of problems there. If it's like it's a genetic payload, if it's a gene therapy, how do you switch it off? How do you control it if something goes wrong? How do you deliver it ultra precisely to specific cell types, specific tissues? And so those are fundamental problems, and those are enabling technologies that we are looking for to solve those fundamental problems. I think operationally, this is also a good point, is that compared to the beginning of the cell and gene therapy space, which was, again, paved by pioneers, and we saw huge prices and huge obstacles for commercialization and development. Now it feels like there's more consolidation and more commoditization of the space. And so what we're seeing, especially in the early stage, is that if before you would need a couple of dozens of millions to get to clinical stage, we are seeing small lean teams getting to the clinical stage with like 10 million or less, depending on where they are. So we're quite bullish on those experienced operational teams that can leverage the resources that they have right now to bring those therapies much cheaper and much faster to market. And business models, I think we're the conservatives here. We mostly focus on platforms, because what Ole was saying is that it's very important to have partnerships, I think, early on for biotechs, because that gives you definitely the runway and the validation and the advice from the more experienced players. So platforms remain a focus of ours.
Great. So Christian, now it's your turn. You represent the kind of the more corporate investor on this panel, at least. You have a lot of experience in that regard as well. So when you look into new technologies, we talked about, this thing that about removing bottlenecks, about making, becoming more efficient within the fields that are already evolving out there instead of trying new things. Both this thing about removing bottlenecks, but also the balance between innovative technologies versus robustness and leveraging old technologies and scaling those. How do you see that evolving?
Thank you.
How do you prioritize that?
Yeah, I mean, we overall try to look at this space from a very fundamental standpoint, which is one, the patient view, and then the biotech, biopharma, life sciences view. It's clear at the moment it's a tough time for CGT. People are getting out, but clearly patient value is being created, right? And the therapies work, and I think that's a fundamental that nobody's getting around. So the puzzling question is, why are people getting out? And if you look at the overall system, what we heard earlier today, these therapies are just incredibly expensive. The health economic systems really can't afford to pay for these, and we're not even scratching the surface, right? Most of the therapies approved today are focused on hematological cancers, not solid tumors, as we've just heard from Therese. And we see overall there's so much space, right? While we hear a little bit this focus now more on in vivo, if you look at the space and you kind of at least somewhat predict where technology can go, there will be room for ex vivo, there will be room for in vivo, there will be hematological, there will be solid tumor. All of the patient need in those areas is so great. We believe ultimately there needs to be a push to focus on, cracking up these bottlenecks. Manufacturing is a big one. I don't need to repeat, I'm very lucky I can just point to the earlier presentation in terms of everything that's been said to automation, to integration of these process steps. Ultimately though, which is a challenge, these technologies, very early stage, have a very hard time raising funds. Anybody who's not working on a therapy, but trying to do manufacturing, trying to do analytics in that space, trying to do even the services around it, everything is incredibly hard to finance. So we obviously try to be an early stage investor, very much focused on supporting these companies, getting to that early stage of validation, to break through, demonstrate that they can solve some of these issues, and then to be able to get to a stage where a Legend, a J&J, BMS, the companies active in those spaces can partner with these early stage technologies. And that is obviously, as a corporate investor, we bring in a lot of experience, and sometimes the ability to help shape the early stages of work to become ready to demonstrate that early stage value and cross that chasm of getting to a stage for those early stage companies that can be further financed, and we're larger investors that are confident to put capital behind these companies. And specifically in CGT, there's across the board of everything that we've heard today, from therapeutics to tools and tech to analytical technology, software. There's a lot of companies that are being developed across Europe and the US and Asia Pacific, and all of them are looking for financing, especially at this point in time of the cycle.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Christian. We need to shift gears again, because I think one of the other things that are interesting, at least if you're developing a company or a tool, is now that you have this panel up here who are used to looking at pitches, what are they actually looking for? What should you pitch to them to get their attention? And maybe, Therese, you can start by giving a little insight into what you do in your areas, about looking into what catches your attention, and how do you differentiate? How do you stick out maybe from the crowd?
So we very much like to invest in companies that are solving a technical unmet need within a modality class, upon which you can then build several therapeutic programs that are addressing unmet clinical needs. So platforms are also a little bit out at the moment, but we don't invest in platforms per se for the sake of it. We always focus from the beginning on the platform to product view. So when pitching, it's very important to really outline, this is the problem statement, why is it a problem, how are you addressing it, what therapeutic programs, because we invest into therapeutic companies, will you be able to build on it, and why will they be differentiated, why will they be attractive to the market. I think a lot of investors have burnt their fingers over the past years, investing a lot of money and time into building platforms, and then turning around and asking themselves, oh, what target should we go after, what indications? So this is not what we mean. Then, of course, it's very important to have convincing supporting data at the preclinical stages, of course, translationally relevant animal models, or if they're not existing, strong human genetic or adjacent clinical data. Head-to-head data versus standard of care and competitors is really important to show differentiation. And then very important is financing to key value inflection points. So these days, Series A is typically financed to clinical proof of concept, and seeds to more, depending on the therapeutic area, the modality, to development candidate or NHP or GLP tox. And then lastly, we look a lot, of course, at the commercial potential, and there I don't mean having exact NPV. That's typically at the early stages not very useful, but really thinking about what is the applicable patient population, how do you identify those, how do you diagnose those, how do you recruit them, how large is that patient population, what is the target product profile that physicians and payers are looking for, and then, of course, having a clinical trial design that matches that. So those will be key items that we look out for.
That's good to hear. This thing about end in mind. Do you know where you're going? Do you have a clear vision of how you're going to get there, and also in a lean way? Ola, I'd like to just ask you a question about, you seem to invest in companies that are platforms, a little bit opposed to what Therese just said here, but also, you have a focus on AI and automation and some of the companies that you've invested in as well. Can you give a bit of an angle to how you assess what to invest in?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're quite easy to deal with. So our thresholds are quite binary. So we need to see at least $2 million in revenue. We're not really like tech scouts who take that early stage risk. We run a very concentrated portfolio, like 8 to 10 names. So I think at that point, you have kind of your first customers, and we'll come in and, first of all, if you're in that kind of stage, we're always interested in this, so feel free to reach out. I think for us, it's just, can this scale, and more importantly, can we help? So the first thing we look for is, do we have a network where we can plug you in? You should kind of perceive us as kind of outsourced BD. We're quite open-minded. We're looking at anything from drug discovery, delivery platforms, reagents, plastics, anything around the bioreactor, QC. I love QC personally because it's super sticky. So also like early stage CROs and CDMOs we're interested in. So we don't have like a certain thing we're actively looking for. We're just looking for things we can scale from, call it $2 million to 20. And I think maybe what you're going to follow up on kind of in terms of the structure of the companies, I think, well, I know I'm coming from a world where kind of financials, balance sheet, and cash flow matters. So for us, it's also seeing that at the end of our investment cycle, we can have a profitable company that can stand on its own legs. A little bit to the funding comments. I think funding for funds will continue to be tough in this space. We don't want our companies to kind of rely on a big check in 3 to 4 years. So we're quite mindful of that. But yeah, open-minded, but numbers really matter to us. Yeah.
Great, thanks a lot. So maybe we'll circle back to you, Matthieu, for the final question in this round before we open for questions from the crowd. Those inflection points that Therese just talked about that could trigger, more investment from you, or you say, okay, get to this stage. We have those traditional inflection points that we're all looking for, regulatory interactions or maturity at certain stages. What does that look like from your point of view right now? You've invested, very broadly, and also in some rather late stage companies that you've followed over a long time. So how do you see this?
No, indeed, I think what really matters for us these days is to be efficient with the cash that we are putting, investing in this company. Over the last years, we have done some mistakes in the field of cell and gene therapy when it comes to our, let's say, investments. When we look back at what did not work, some of these companies decided, for example, to spend a lot of money on building a manufacturing plan as an example, even before having the full product ready and so on. And so it was, I think, looking back, some kind of distractions, and a lot of people are able to make it better and faster than what you can do when you build from scratch. Of course, there are always exceptions and so on, but this is what we can see from our portfolio. And I think for early stage companies, relying on the strategic partnership, not only with pharma, but also with a CDMO or CRDMO could be something very interesting to be cash efficient. No need to reinvent the wheel at some point. Some people know how to produce LNPs, know how to produce AAVs, or know how to produce LVs. So maybe better to work with them at the beginning to be sure that you are able to scale, that your product is working, that your product is safe. And then, if needed, raise, during the additional raise, dedicate some part of this funding to have your own facilities if needed. But again, I think over the last years, these CDMOs and or CROs are more willing also to collaborate with early stage biotechs. And I think it could be a win-win situation also to be more efficient, to raise maybe less cash, and also it's more difficult to raise 100 million this year as it has been the case in 21 as an example. So yeah, cash efficiency is key for us.
Great, thanks Matthieu.
Yeah, just to follow on kind of what I've seen over the past 18 months as well, I think founders are being way more creative and dynamic. So you spin out of Sweden, you give no equity to the university, you have your R&D in France, you get 30% back, you do your clinical trial in Australia. I think there are a lot of tools out there that I think a lot of founders have yet to find, but they're there, and I think you can maximize kind of your money in a much better way, which I think is quite innovative. And then you put your BD in the US, start selling there because it's much easier, at least on the tool side. And then I'm also seeing a trend, or we are seeing a trend, that companies are choosing to build slower. I don't know, it's probably forced a little bit by the funding environment, but we're seeing a lot of companies being able to break even around 2 and 3 million euros, which I think is in Europe, which is new. And I really like that, because then, and the founders, I think, are in a much stronger position when they go into negotiations with people like us. They can say, well, you know, if you're not happy with the terms, we can still stand on our own legs for 6 more months, and we can reach some more milestones. And I think kudos to them, well done. But it's definitely been difficult and annoying, but I think it's a good way to build.
Thanks for that additional comment, Ole. So we'll open the floor for questions, if there are any, before coffee. Step up and to the microphone here, yeah.
Thank you very much for a nice panel. Steinheisen, Alder Therapeutics. I was just wondering if the panel can reflect on allogeneic replacement cell therapies. Now Novo is also getting out, and the future of it, if there is any. Please.
Who wants to give it a go?
You go ahead, Christian.
Sure. So I would say, generally speaking, I think at the moment what we are seeing is that all of the, it's the cycle, kind of hype cycle, has come out of shape now, but we are seeing all of the therapeutic approaches, autologous, allogeneic, still moving forward very much. Ultimately, we're invested in a company. We think the dose levels can come down, cost per dose, to below 20K. That's a 5 to 10-fold reduction. In that area, if you can do these type of improvements, I mean, this will shift stock prices of public companies. This is going to, allow to treat 10, 100-fold, within years, more patients in this space. So we're very bullish that, these short-term decisions, all of the companies that are getting out are investing in other areas. And if you look at why they're doing, it's probably a good, good decision if you're sitting in the boardroom of that company. So we try not to get carried away of, people pulling out. On the other side, if you look at the last couple of billion-dollar exits in the US, there's a good amount of cell therapy, and allogeneic, autologous is still going to play a dominant role in that space. That's our personal view. Yeah.
So the answer is it's too soon to call who the winner is, or maybe it'll be everyone. Maybe there's room enough for different modalities going forward as well. Next question.
A little bit similar, so I'll be cheeky and tag a second one on. But very quickly, do you get any interest or does tissue engineering still excite anybody? Because it doesn't get discussed much. We've had a lot of interesting discussion today about CAR-Ts, and it does tend to become polarized to that. And my second question is, do you think that the time is nearly up for viral vectors and that gene therapy is going to move into nanoparticles?
Okay, we'll do the first one.
Again, yeah, I guess I can comment on the first one since we're a longevity fund and just tissue engineering is important. I mean, it's a hard space, right? And there haven't been that many wins. But that being said, I think on our side at least, we're quite excited with tissue engineering replacement approaches. And we're seeing movement in the space and that we're seeing increasing support. I think a good example here is some outlandish ideas like, replacing parts of the brain. And there's the ARPA-H program for that that has been announced in the summer. And so I think, I mean, it's a difficult space. I think it's in many ways, much more difficult, just like, this whole allogeneic versus autologous versus in vivo CAR-T, because it needs, 3D architecture is much more difficult to maintain as compared to single cells. But we are quite excited, and we are looking at approaches in the sector.
Matthieu, sorry, go ahead.
And on viral vectors, yeah, we continue to look a lot at it, and we have a lot of portfolio companies as well developing viral gene therapies. And specifically, they work well in areas, of course, where no other modalities can do the same thing. So we have one portfolio company, which is an optogenetics approach for people who basically cannot see. So those are amazing things that you can do with viral vectors. But also, I think both in cell and gene therapy, including viral vectors, we're seeing a move from sort of the more smaller monogenic diseases also to wider, larger indications like oncology. So we have one portfolio company together that is an AAV-driven approach for glioblastoma, and they will go into additional solid tumor indications after. So yes, of course, still of interest.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Great discussion. I wonder how much you look for synergies when you pick a project. Is it important for you that a certain platform fits with a certain CMC technology you develop? I'm also asking, I wonder myself, if I'm looking for an investor, would it be a good argument to say, well, this AI platform really improves processes that you are supporting in other projects? Or do you look at each project in a very siloed fashion?
So you mean portfolio versus, individual investments? Yeah. Uhrich, can you first? And then
yeah,
Matthieu,
I can go, but we don't really do therapeutics, so it's a little bit, but maybe to rephrase, I think we are definitely looking for like cross synergies inside the portfolio, also Fund 1 and Fund 2, but it is a secondary for us. It's not required, but it's obviously very nice to have some cross-selling and some synergies. We do, however, look actively for synergies with our LPs. So we are very close with them, we speak to them very often, and we make sure that there are some way of working together with them. And once we invest, that's kind of a criteria as well.
Hello, thank you. I have a rather pointed two-part question on the gene therapy space. Why would there be any desire to fund new therapies, new capsids, et cetera, when the cost of production and the cost of the treatments might indicate commercial failure in the end, even if clinically successful? And while there's some interest in funding development of new manufacturing technologies that might reduce the cost, there isn't really a lot of action in that space. Anyone care to comment?
Yeah, so this comes into the point that I made on commercial potential. So of course, also looking at what would be the COGS, what would be the potential margin is very important for the business case. And also thinking about, because we exit to M&A to pharma companies, or less ideally to public markets, but so of course we as investors do diligence also with the potential buyers. What type of revenue do you need to see, what type of data, etc. And of course the big pharmas require very high revenue threshold to be interested, but you have also more mid-cap potential buyers who are also interested in the 400 to 500 million peak sales. And so, yeah, indeed, you have to look at what the margin will be in the COGS, but if you can find business cases that make sense.
And I think you can bring the prices down, and like if we're looking, for instance, as I mentioned, for gene therapy in common disease, one way is that, well, the market is much larger, right? If you're targeting, SMA versus you're targeting atherosclerosis, for instance, much different markets. And the other thing is, like in many of those cases, I think a very specific answer here is that with some of the viral vectors, and if you're going local instead of systemic, you can decrease the dose 100-fold, 1,000-fold, thereby also decreasing the COGS quite significantly.
Great. So thanks a lot to the panel for coming here and sharing your thoughts and opinions and knowledge in the area.